Good morning. Race matters, but what can I do? The Methodist Federation for Social Action Programming for 2020 intended 3 events to address and redress racism, but COVID prevented such gatherings. In April, a UMW Faith Talk speaker asked, "What does God want me to learn from COVID?" That simple yet profound question moved the personal discomforts of COVID to the bigger picture of racism's harm in this country. It became increasingly evident that people of color in the United States were being disproportionately impacted by COVID, exposing inequities caused by uneven access to or exclusion from this country's resources. And then George Floyd's murder ignited worldwide reaction to the spiritual virus that is racism in America. As I speak this morning, a new set of tapes and transcriptions of that attempted arrest and the brutal treatment, the inhumane treatment of George Floyd vividly portray to us how racism is alive and well in our communities in this country. Racism must be confronted on 2 levels in order to intervene in historically entrenched racist thoughts and actions in this country. At the individual and personal level, recalcitrant racist attitudes embedded in our daily community interactions, such as that in Minnesota and another in Indiana reported on the news yesterday, need to be recognized, repented, and rejected by white Americans. At the institutional level, sustained practices that have controlled and denied equal access to resources in our society, including education, housing, employment, healthcare, and the legal system, must be identified and changes demanded. On both levels, there has been and continues to be injustice. Racism is not merely prejudice. Among the many definitions out there, I'll offer the one from the Anti-Defamation League, which defines racism as a belief that a particular race is superior. Once race is defined as being superior, one race, then all others immediately have to be inferior to it, and that a person's social and moral traits are predetermined by his or her inborn biological characteristic and genetic makeup based on the race into which they were born. The principles in our laws and the tenets of our faith require dismantling racist practices and perceptions that perpetuate harm and cause suffering. Previous efforts have not eradicated overt and covert racism. Desegregating schools by busing students outside their neighborhoods failed to correct educational inequities, and employment and college quotas intended to compensate Black Americans disadvantaged by the uneven educational process generated overt antagonism and legal challenges. Such efforts to achieve institutional change failed to eradicate racism or to provide significant access to those who had been marginalized, discounted, and excluded from opportunities more widely available to white people. The energy and passion of marches by dynamic leaders, passionate speeches, outrage at egregious damage perpetrated on Black people seeking simple human rights have not created enduring change. Why? Ohio's responses to COVID illustrate how difficult change is. Governor DeWine appealed to us to just care for others' well-being and by social distancing, etc., which is still not being consistently practiced. As of today, 7 counties in Ohio are now under a mandate to wear masks. Why did they not comply? Dr. Amy Acton's more direct approach aroused such animosity that armed protesters accosted her for having too much power. That contrast and its conflicts illustrate that changing attitudes and systems and behaviors is difficult, demanding work with resistance and pushback. But that does not justify our silence or our inability to act now. So how is this conversation, this study, going to be any different from so many others that are going on and being offered today? An educator by training and commitment, I know that change is a process, as it is mirrored throughout all of creation. Some say, I don't like change, I don't want it, but it's inevitable for our own survival as we age. In COVID, we have no control over that. We need to adapt to, we must adapt to those changes. Some just consider the rise of gym memberships, popular diet programs, more recent practicum requirements when it was determined that college graduates were unable to readily transfer classroom learning into real work situations. We who listen attentively to excellent Sunday messages, do we recall that message sufficient to live it in our daily lives and interactions during the week once we leave the sanctuary? Human beings can resist. We need models, but we also need commitment. This study is based on examining resources and conditions that have impacted and are impacting Black lives negatively in our still largely segregated communities, and comparing or contrasting those resources, those conditions, and those experiences to what we experience. Your observations, insights, questions will be shared in Facebook, a virtual discussion forum. It is a design I created for teaching online at the University of Toledo. Formulating and articulating our thoughts provides reflection, and reflection can promote understanding, and thus considering other people's experiences and perspectives, which will help us to see perhaps other possibilities. Self-awareness and deeper understanding of our own and of others' experiences leads us toward changes that can transform us into change agents necessary for intervening in the harm our Black sisters and brothers have endured and are still being subjected to. I also encourage keeping your own personal journal for your personal journey of discovery. These are processes, not just listening to facts, that facilitate understanding, which is the vehicle for change to occur in our society, in our local communities, and in ourselves. That understanding is the medium for changes that our communities need, our brothers and sisters of color deserve, and our God has called us to undertake. Change must begin in us, including accepting responsibility for change and committing to it. This virtual study utilizes Zoom and Facebook as the primary mediums of weekly interactions, connections, and thoughtful discussion. Podcasts from a variety of sources, such as UMW Faith Talks, some of the East Ohio Conference pastors' studies, and specific messages can be viewed on your own. Selections from the books of Discipline and Resolution inform and remind us of the United Methodist Church's position and provide guidance as to living in more holy ways as we examine racism's harm in America and in Ohio today. Other resources will also be suggested, and hopefully you will bring some insights and observations and questions based on your experiences and the resources that appeal to you and speak to you. It may seem like a long time to continue talking about this topic again over many weeks, but racism has grown and festered for 400 years in America. It deserves a long, hard look and our commitment to examine our role and our responsibility in dismantling it. Thank you for joining this study supported by East Ohio social justice seekers, particularly MFSA and Multicultural Vitality. I am Carol Nelson Burns, a social justice educator and an advocate. Again, thank you. Good morning.